Welcome to the Police Academy's description of the Sergeant's Exam 2012 Sanford Divisional Profile. What I want to do here is to talk you through the important document that you've now received, to note any changes from last year's document, and to consider whether that has any relevance for possible exam topics, and to highlight a few important strategic issues. Why have the document? Well, it's to put every candidate on a level playing field, whether they normally work in a large or small, urban or rural police force. The divisional profile has an introduction page. It just sets the scene for the constabulary that you work for, the division, and the sector at West Ferry. What it shows us is that you're working in a typical semi-urban area, which is semi-industrial, has a diverse population with both the good and the bad and the ugly, and it's a quite diverse population. Just what we need in order to be able to set the scene for a few generic problems to deal with. The divisional profile shows us the distribution of resources. It shows us that we've got a number of departments that could be helpful to us. So for instance, we can see that Cole is a detective inspector that leads a public protection unit. And we've had in the past questions and scenarios where officers are struggling to deal with domestic abuse effectively. And so although you're going to retain ownership in the scenario for dealing with those issues and for monitoring and developing your staff, it may well be that you can go to the PPU in order to get help in terms of awareness raising and some key training support. Speaking of which, you can see I've put in 3 red borders around 3 particular resources I think that could be of particular benefit to you. Vickery is that divisional training officer, and it may well be that there's times it's the most effective and efficient way is to get Vickery to run some training for the team. It may be that you find one officer has a weakness, and so you'd decide that that officer will get some special support, but what you will do is retrain the whole team to ensure that standards are high throughout. There's a community engagement team that is available there to help you engage with, to communicate with, to understand a community. And they may well be able to help you in terms of having a communication strategy, an engagement strategy to work with hard to reach groups. It may well be that they can help with overcoming language barriers or other types of blockers to communication. They may well be able to help you locate and utilise those community leaders that we really need to help us engage properly with people. And I've also put a red border around the operations staff. We're going to talk about the recession and the relative shortage of overtime and issues like that, but it may be that you can get help from the operations team to get through the problems and to deliver service well. Here we can see some information around the tasking and coordination group. If you want overtime, if you want resources such as those operations staff we talked about, you come to the TCG to get it. But overtime is going to be hard in a time of recession, and the second column explains that the TCG will consider allocating resources and overtime from its budget. However, and it quotes, due to the current financial constraints, other methods may be implemented. I'll come on to what those could be, but you will need to expect to juggle around the resources you've got in order to manage the problems, and I don't think you'll be getting too much by the way of an overtime budget to help you deal with things. 2 issues I want to raise here on the centralised custody and call handling page. Centralised custody. Last year there were 4 custody suites in the divisional profile. This year there is just the 1. Now for me that's a significant change. Thinking practically, as a critical incident manager on a BCU, I have 3 custody suites. If we were to go down to just 1, well, we would struggle because of longer travelling times. Well, that won't be a problem for you because your team works at West Ferry and the custody suite is at West Ferry. So that's one good part. But the bad part potentially is that we've got a lot of other officers bringing their detainees to your suite, where that's going to mean delays potentially for your officers in dealing with things. It may be they've got to wait longer to get detainees in and to process them, to get time for interview suites, to have legal reps available for them. It may be that they are called upon to conduct searches for colleagues. It may well be, I think, that your officers may start to get hacked off. They may be quite upset about this inconvenience, and they may be doing good or bad things to avoid coming to the custody suite. Are they starting to cuff jobs? Are they not dealing with them properly? Now, it may well be that you can think of alternative ways through voluntary attendance, dealing with people away from the police station. Think of the necessity principle. Do we need to have people come into custody? It may well be that through street bail or through effective bail management processes, we can spread out the work so that we can have less times when we're at peak demand trying to make use of that suite as a team. Just be thinking around the issues that you can think about that might arise from having a smaller suite or only the one suite across the division, and how you could manage your team effectively to overcome the problems that occur. The call handling centre, I would just raise one particular reference to that. There is an IPAO system which talks about immediate, prompt attendance by appointment or no attendance. And for the prompt attendance, you can see that the service delivery expectation is that officers will attend within 1 hour. Watch your back. So we aren't doing it sometimes. If that happens, remember the service recovery model. I talked about it in the sorry tip of the week. You can hear that again if you look back. And that talks about 3 steps: apology, putting right the harm that's been done, and preventing reoccurrence. It's worthwhile remembering that service recovery model because you will be planning to apply it during this exam. Okay, sector management structure, and here we see your team. I've put in a red border your job, congratulations Sergeant, and I've also put in red border your team. Now we know from the letter that the NPIA has sent to you that you will be meeting Constables Cooper, Hoyle and Tang. And here you can see that you are the line manager, they are within your team. I'll talk more about them in the next tip of the week, as well as the 2 external role actors that you're going to meet. But I would make mention here that you can see you've got a constable vacancy and a PCSO vacancy. This exam will be testing you to make sure that you will ensure that you deliver the same quality of service with less resources. It's tough, but we're doing it day in and day out as a service already, and the exam wants to make sure that you can do that too. So how can you manage that? Well, you'll have to juggle people, find priorities, set expectations, and make use of the resources around you. And we can see from the sector that you can perhaps overcome the issues around visibility with special constables. You may well find that you can use the overlap time that the response teams have. You may be able to use some of the core response time that the response officers have when setting patrols. And you may be able to call on via the TCG those special ops resources that we can get our hands on if we ask nicely. Potential exam subjects I think could include maybe a PCSO or a special constable trying to step up to the plate and to do some of the work that that missing constable is doing. And it may go wrong because they've not been sufficiently trained. And so typically for Osprey 2, good people do bad things, and it all needs to be solved, recovered, and plans made to recover it in the future. One tip I would give you is don't try to train people to do jobs they're not trained or expected to do. Don't try to make a PCSO do a constable's job. Don't expect special constables to be able to do a regular officer's job without all the training that a regular officer has. So they may be able to undertake aspects of it, but they couldn't cover it completely. The sergeant can make sure that we overcome those issues, and that'll be you. This page on number 7 shows us the project reform, and it tells us about all the problems that we've got in terms of the recession and cutbacks. Have a read of it, nothing will surprise you there. But it does mean those 2 vacancies you've got as a constable and a PCSO, they're not going to get filled in a hurry. what you take away from this is that value for money is very important. So taking from the last slide value for money and putting with it the 3 strategic aims listed here, we get what I call the big 4 strategic aims: keeping crime and antisocial behaviour low, maintaining confidence and satisfaction, making people feel safe, and doing so by delivering a value for money approach. Throughout the Learning Resource Centre, through the scenarios that we write, and during the course that you're going to attend, we will really emphasise the importance of enforcement and reassurance. And this is why. You have to undertake enforcement activity to keep crime and antisocial behaviour, to make people satisfied. But unless you also give equal consideration to a reassurance approach, you will not deliver confidence and you will not make people feel safe. So when you are giving solutions, explain that you are doing this and this and this to enforce, so that we keep crime and antisocial behaviour low, so that victims of crime are satisfied. But you're also doing this and this and this to provide reassurance to the community, to build public confidence and to make people feel safe. And in your next steps phases, when you're going to measure success, make sure that you are saying that you are going to look at how many crimes, how many calls occur, in order to make sure that we see we are solving problems, but also that we are talking to the community and that we are monitoring how they live their lives, if you like, in terms of making use of space again when they didn't go there before because of gang problems, for instance. And we can see for ourselves and have community leaders tell us that things are better. And those are the ways to measure reassurance. The priorities, you need to know them off by heart. You need to know that when you're dealing with an issue, that you should put time, effort, resources into it because it's a priority for us here. The National Decision Making Model is new this year. It's the NPIA keeping up to date with national best practice, and now the NDM is national. If you haven't had training on it yet, your force will have an NCOLT package ready for you to use. It's a 30-minute lecture. It's worth doing. But don't worry about it too much. It is, in fact, just very similar to the model that we use in the PA plan. And if you link that to the strategic aims that we've just talked about, then you will deliver the NDM. Really, essentially, what you need to say in each scenario is who will do what and why. If you do that, you'll follow the NDM. Hate crime, lots of definitions, but you must love them by now because you've passed part 1. You need to know these definitions. You need to recognise them in this scenario and remark upon them, saying that this incident here amounts to a hate crime, and I will therefore record it, I will have it investigated, and we will report back to you. We will update you with what is going on. There's a new definition of hate incident. I've put it in a red border. You need to know that. A new definition in an important subject like this, be ready for it to come up during the exam. The last page I'm going to show you talks about the grievance procedure. When officers misbehave, and it relates to colleagues, candidates will normally recognise that something is wrong and that it needs to change. Often they will recognise that the matter is actually a breach of the standards of professional behaviour, and often will say so. It is really important that you do, because that is the key to management action as a resolution at this sort of level, and that means the action plan that you're going to give. And if it doesn't work, then we can get towards UPP, unsatisfactory performance procedure. But the action plan comes first. And officers often will go through that, but very often they will not describe the issue as a potential grievance. And you need to talk about the consequences to a misbehaving officer, about what could be in store for them if they don't change. Being subject of a grievance procedure is never much fun. If it relates to something like bullying or bullying a female colleague, for instance, something which could eventually lead to an employment tribunal, well, the consequences then can be described through an ITOM. The consequences for the individual, be that the offender or the victim, the impact that will have on the team. For the organisation, of course, there will be issues around publicity, embarrassment, loss of confidence. And for the neighbourhood, that lost confidence can also lead to then women not wanting to join such an organisation, and the organisation therefore suffering because it doesn't have the quality of people and the representativeness it could have within the community because we have that officer that misbehaved in that way. So being able to talk about the grievance procedure as a consequence, as well as the consequences that follow the standards of professional behaviour lapses, are really important. And if you can do that, you can well score more points. So that brings us to an end. The guide, the trot through the divisional profile. I hope you found that useful. The next tip of the week, we'll look at the 5 role actors that you're going to meet in the exam. That will be the 3 internal candidates, role actors, that's Cooper, Hoyle and Tang, and also the council worker, Dervish, and the local business leader, Irvine. Look forward to speaking with you then. Thank you.